really great questions in the Q&A. A number of those have been answered there. We can, I think there's a few new ones that have just popped up, and some answers are going in as I speak right now. We also do have a little bit of time for some live discussion. And before we go to that, I'd just like to remind everyone that we have 3 more workshop sessions. And next week will be StravoSpot and EarthChem CSAR after that. And then our look to what we need to do to the future to build on all of these efforts so far. So there are, I think, some questions here that would be useful for further discussion. One of those is about taking this perspective a bit farther. I know we've had a number of our panelists here from the US, and we've gotten a lot of US perspective. It would be useful to take that outside the US. I know we have participants from all over the world. We have some panelists who have worked with teams from other places. And so maybe we could have some discussion about fair and open data from around the world and how that is being enacted and implemented in other places. Kirsten, is that something that you could speak to? I think you're muted.
What was the exact question that you?
Just about a more international perspective on implementation of fair and open data.
Yeah, I mean, that remains a pretty challenging activity. There are organizations that really help. I mean, I mentioned, some that are very focused on FAIR, but there are other organizations such as the Research Data Alliance that provide a platform to work together. They do have interest groups focusing on specific disciplines. There is one interest group for the earth sciences, actually, in data management, but I also think that it is very critical to engage the professional societies. So working, for example, with the Geochemical Society, working through sections of the AGU or GSA and get together there and try to build interest groups around data is really critical. The most societies, EGU, AGU, GSA, have sections for data. The AGU has an Earth and Space Science Informatics section, as has the European Geoscience Union. The GSA has a Geoinformatics and Computation. I think they changed its name slightly. So that, I think, is the best of these conferences from societies offers a really good way to work together. I find it, we have just initiated One Geochemistry as an effort, or just it's been 3 years, working across multiple continents and trying to establish data exchange protocols for geochemical data with the goal to have a network of data resources. It's challenging, as it's very hard for us to find funding and dedicated staff to drive these organizations somehow. But you have an absolutely fantastic foundation to work within YEFZI and this effort and advance international outreach. Many of countries like Germany, for example, with the National Research Data Infrastructure, NFDI, that they advancing, there are opportunities nationally to engage in data standardization and so on. And often these organizations then interact on an international basis. So it's really mapping the landscape and trying to find the right place to engage with.
Thank you.
And I provide some links later on into the chat or into the the Google folder for, for those who are interested in some of these initiatives.
Let's see, there are a couple other questions I think that would probably be worth trying to include in our last little bit of time. One of these is about data descriptions, data publication, versus kind of the normal publications of papers with the data attached to them, and some concern about is the review of these things at the same level? Are people watching out for perhaps issues of self-plagiarism, those kinds of things?
Yes, I can take that one. And yes is the short answer. So publishing a data descriptor, the peer review process is exactly the same. And it's, yeah, the data aspects are considered, but also the same aspects that you would consider for any other article. I think I can interpret that question in a couple of ways. I think that the specific definition of, or the technical definition of self-plagiarism is reuse of text explicitly, and that's more kind of technical consideration. It tends to happen, it happens more commonly in technical documents. So if you're describing methods or something like that, there's an argument that it's slightly more common and maybe slightly more understandable if you're publishing similar papers that measure data in the same ways, that there might be sentences that are the same. But that's relatively easily resolved. I think probably what it means, maybe the wider meaning on it, is probably what we would call sort of fragmentation, and I guess justifying whether the paper should be there, anyway. So talk about kind of salami slicing research projects and increasing the number of publications out of a particular project or a particular data set beyond what would be kind of ethically acceptable. And again, the same rules apply for a data descriptor as would anything else. If something is published already in an existing article, so if your data is described somewhere else, shared somewhere else, covered somewhere else, then then it's already extant in the scientific record, so there isn't a justification for a data descriptor. That said, if only the story has been published, or only a certain segment of it has been published, or only a certain take on it has been published, for example, then there's sometimes a wider justification for an associated paper. I don't have any statistics on it, but to make a general guess, I'd actually say that most of what we publish as scientific data, the majority of the data descriptors would probably be first disclosures. So that's more common as a practice, to publish data brand new as data without any related publications, and that's the primary publication, and then it's the other related subsequent publications that the other editor would think about in terms of, is it necessary or is it justifiable. But yeah, there are cases where we publish data, data descriptors alongside normal articles, and the same rules apply. And then also, I think the final point is not even just relating to other publications, but the broad concept of whether or not this needs a contribution per se. There are data types and there are data standards and there are established ways of doing things that are so ubiquitous and so well understood and so established that you don't necessarily need to write a document on it. So if the metadata standards are great and the tool is common and the methods are known, then if somebody could understand the data straight from the repository without the need for a separate publication, then that's also sometimes a criteria where a reviewer would say, is this a necessary addition to literature? I don't have any kind of earth science examples for that, but genomics is one example. Sometimes if you're sequencing a genome, then broadly speaking, you can publish that as is, and unless you've done something different, then that data stands on its own, so you wouldn't publish something. But yeah, generally speaking, the same rules apply, and the same processes are applied, and the same peer review processes are applied. So.
Thank you. So let's see, I think we have a hand raised, and there was another question then in a document here. I should also mention, just having seen what's come through the Q&A, there have been actually several questions that I think would be really good targets for further discussion in our fourth session. Some of the gaps in database support for certain kinds of things have come up. We've also had some questions related to kind of how things connect, not just the fair and open data, but also with the human side of things. And I think one place where that has come up, some of us may have heard of this concept of icon science, or integrated, coordinated, open, and networked. And in that case, network doesn't necessarily mean digitally networked. It also means human networks, and how people can work together across different nations, early career, late career, all of these sorts of things, so that the whole research enterprise works for all. Would anyone like to comment on that? And then we can go to the hand raise.
I guess I'll take a stab with the acknowledgement that I'm not familiar with the icon principles, but I will just state that at least from the NSF perspective, our Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure and a lot of its public strategic planning documents has really been forward in acknowledging that efforts toward a more networked and fair and open research scientific enterprise really hinge on human capital. And so a lot of the funding efforts, both explicit efforts like the cyber training program, and also kind of building into efforts like CSSI in the acknowledgement of professional mentoring plans, really build on kind of the human aspect of things. And I think that's also acknowledged with this open Pharos RCN solicitation, with a focus really on the human networking side of how do we achieve fair data.
Okay, let's see. Let me see if I can find. Okay, I have, trying to see if I can get to. We have the hand raise here. Okay, it says talking permitted now. Okay, but I've got chat. Andre, can you?
Yeah, Kathy, you can, if you unmute your microphone, you will be able to talk, unless you hit this button by mistake. Sometimes it happens when you hit the raise hand. So you also have to sign in into a computer, something, voice. Well, Steve, maybe we can move on.
Okay, yeah, we could also put maybe that question
Yep.
into the Q&A and make sure it gets addressed there.
Steve, I actually have, wanted to hand over the question that you asked me about international to Raleigh, because I think it's hitting you there, Raleigh, sorry. But, are there, I mean, for a while, there was a lot of excitement around the Belmont Forum as an international effort to work across funding agencies internationally to support data research in the broadest sense. So I wonder if any of these things are still happening or new ones in the planning that would perhaps solve some of the questions that attendees have.
Right, I think that's really valuable. It's like, how can the funding agencies help people develop international research networks and collaborations?
Yes, I can briefly speak to that. So I was actually going to mention the Belmont Forum is an example of a truly international set of funding opportunities, which have included opportunities around fair and open data. Of course, NSF as a U.S. federal agency is almost exclusively limited to supporting U.S.-based institutions and scientists. But there are multiple kind of bilateral arrangements between the United States and other international funding agencies. And certainly that's one opportunity to advance initiatives on an international level, basically to coordinate proposal submissions to partner agencies abroad and in the United States. But it is just the reality that I think a path forward is that scientists in different countries develop opportunities and then network those together. And I think there's an acknowledgement in SF when you're working with scientists overseas and their collaborative arrangements that can be beneficial to these projects.
Steve, you want to mention about the homework we're going to send to Tephra group for the Strub spot?
Sure. Yeah. So some of the upcoming sessions will be made much more effective if we have participants preparing ahead of time. And so some of the presenters for those are putting together some resources, some suggested activities and things to do to be prepared and ready. And so we'll make sure to distribute those out through the Google group so that everyone has access. All right, well, I think we're coming up on the end of our time. Thanks everyone so much for all of your presentations and the useful questions and discussion. We can probably leave this running for a short while longer if anyone wants to add something to the Q&A. And then again, we'll archive that and make it available, and we can hope to see you all next week.